Hi, it's Claudia from Create with Claudia. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today I'm doing something a little different. It's not a tutorial, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about embellishing quilts, specifically 13 ways to embellish your quilt. There are so many fun things you can use, and I can't wait to show them to you. Now, before I actually get into my list, I do quickly want to tell you what an embellishment is. And I'm first going to start off by giving you the official Oxford Language Dictionary definition. And I need to read this. An embellishment is a decorative detail or feature added to something to make it more attractive. That's the plain and simple way to describe it. Basically, embellishing a quilt is adding something to it, like a charm or a ribbon or something like that. Something to just something added on top. A quilt is usually just a flat object, and the embellishment adds to it. And I have a lot of fun embellishing my quilts. I don't do it all the time. It's not something I would do with a quilt that you're going to use every day, or that you're going to, maybe you don't want to embellish a baby quilt, that kind of thing. So you definitely want to keep that in mind when you are embellishing a quilt, just to think about who the recipient is going to be or where you're going to hang it. It's also not something you want to wash, put in the washer. I mean, we all make utilitarian quilts. This is more for something special. There are a number of reasons people embellish their quilts. Number one, sentimental reasons. Maybe you got a necklace or a charm or something from a loved one that passed away, or maybe you have a special baby memory for your baby that you want to keep special and you want to incorporate into your quilt. That's a great embellishment, something like that. So sentimental reasons are great reasons for embellishing quilts. Adding dimension. It's a great way to add some dimension. Like I said before, quilts are a flat object. You can add a little pop to it, a little height, a little texture to it. That's always fun to do. My favorite is because you want to add a little bling to your quilt, and I'll show you some examples I've done, beading, that kind of thing. It's a lot of fun to add some bling to your quilt. It adds a little bit of extra interest. One really good example of a embellished quilt are Victorian quilts. They're called crazy quilts, and if you've ever seen pictures of them, and people still make them today, crazy quilts are great. It's sort of oddly shaped, or it can be any kind of shape, fabric pieces you want, and they're embellished with stitching and all kinds of ornaments and things like that. And if you've been lucky enough to see one of the sort of original ones, I believe it's Victorian times that they were started, they are incredible, and the stitching on that, I don't know if it can ever be matched. I'm sure there are people that can match it. I know certainly I cannot. But crazy quilts are the perfect example of an early, maybe even the first type of embellished quilt. And another one I've seen, and these are more for dementia Alzheimer's patients. I've never made one, and I've only seen them online, like a fidget quilt. That has a lot of, that is considered an embellishment too. I think it's, they use it to keep their hands occupied for, again, Alzheimer's or dementia patients. So it's a great tactile tool too. I have never used it for that purpose, but I have seen those online. So that just gives you a little bit of background of embellishments. And now I'm going to get into my 13 different ways you can embellish your quilt. All right, so number one, and I'll tell you if I've done them or if I haven't, I will show you examples. I do have some examples here, but number one is ribbon. Ribbon, you could tie a bow and just stitch it, hand stitch it to the top of a quilt, make a little pretty ribbon for maybe a Christmas wreath or something like that. So ribbon is a great way, and as you know, if you've been to a craft store, you know there, I mean, 1,000,001 different ribbons you could choose from. So ribbon is an excellent embellishment for a quilt. Number two is beads. Beads are awesome, and again, just like with ribbon, there are 1,000,000 different kinds. The sky's the limit on beads. Here's some fake pearls and some plastic and some little 3D ones, and I'm going to show you here in a quick second. Let me put these away. I have done beading on quilts. I love adding beads to quilts. I don't do it a whole lot. Like I said, you can't really wash them, but there's some beads. And let me find my quilt. Here we go. This is one I made. Here's one example of beading. And it was made, this is a school of fish under the sea. So the dark fabric was my sea fabric. And I'm probably, it's going to be really hard for you to see on the camera, but I'll show a picture up here. You can see I use seed beads all around in the dark to add like a glisten shimmer to the water. And those are teeny tiny seed beads that I sewed on with clear thread. So that's one example of beading. And here's another example of beading. This was a Christmas quilt I made. Let me just flatten that down a little bit. And you can see there's some seed beads and then some bigger beads. And then in the center of this one as well, and let me see if I can move this. There's some more. I did a snowflake in the middle, and hopefully you're able to see that, and that is all out of seed beads. I don't know if I would do that again personally, but I really love the way it looked. Again, it added texture, dimension, and bling to this quilt, and just a little bit of added extra interest. Buttons. Buttons are awesome, and everybody has buttons, and I don't know about you, but I know my mother gave me a big bin of all her old buttons. I love putting buttons on quilts, and let me see if I can find a quilt here where I have one. This is a quilt that I made for a contest. It was a contest based on the fabric, and for some reason that 30s reproduction fabric reminded me of the kitchen, so I designed this fun little sort of whimsical quilt with different aprons. But there I used a button right in the center. Hopefully you can see that right there. And that's lots of fun. So buttons are a great and inexpensive way to embellish a quilt. Sticking with this quilt, I'm going to show you the next thing is charms. And there are so many cute charms out there, all kinds of things. This is just a fun little, it's like, has bling and a charm in it. It's like a number 8 or eyeglasses, whatever you want to make it. So charms are a great way, and I want to show you, this is that quilt again. I added all kinds to sort of hit home with that kitchen theme of this quilt. There's the apron. I used peanut butter and jelly charm. Here's like a cookbook charm. Let's see what else. There's a fork and a knife charm. Just lots of fun, lots of whimsy, and this quilt has a lot of charms on it. Just remember, some of them are a little bit heavier, so it does add a little bit of weight, but charms are a great way to embellish a quilt. So up next is something a little bit fun and a little bit different. Pom-poms. Maybe not the real big, well, hey, you can embellish your quilt with whatever you want. I like to use these little ones. These are about 1/4 of an inch. I use this in a Halloween quilt. I just added it as sort of a little, I just sewed it in when I was sewing these two strips or rows together. Here's some more example. Here's some black. Black would have looked good on that too for Halloween. Maybe another inner border. And these are just those mini pom-pom ribbons. And then here's a really small one, and here's like a pale pink. It's really pretty. I think pom-poms are so much fun, and boy, do they add a lot of texture and a dimension to your quilt. Another fun one, and I've actually done a tutorial on this. I'll put a link up on the screen to make a table runner. Rickrack. Rickrack is really fun and really easy to add to quilts. And here is it's a Christmas quilt I made many years ago. And all I did is use squares, some scrappy squares, some more that were scrappy squares of my Christmas fabric. And just along the seams, these are just, I think they were 5-inch squares or something like that. And along the seams, this rickrack was sewn on. I think it looks terrific. It adds a whole nother look to this quilt. It really jazzes it up. And that is an embellishment. You can sort of feel it's tactile. Now this quilt I will put in the washing machine, on gentle of course, because this was all machine sewn down, so I'm not too worried about it. A lot of times, most of my embellishments I do add by hand, depending on what they are, but this one again was my machine, so this one I do wash. The next one, unfortunately, I don't have an example of, but doing this video has sort of spurred me into some ideas. If you have fabric paint, I think that would be a wonderful embellishment. If you could paint like a design on your quilt, I'm sure there are artists out there that do that. How much fun would that be with fabric paint? This is not fabric paint, I'm just using this as an example, but you could do some beautiful work, or even have maybe your child draw something on your quilt or on your fabric, that kind of thing. So fabric paint is a great embellishment. Lace is another one, and here's one that might be sentimental, you never know. First I wanted to show you this gorgeous lace here. Hopefully you can see that. It's very hard to see. It's very narrow. It's sort of a rainbow of corals. Very beautiful. And if you could maybe hand stitch that on, wouldn't that be beautiful? I mean, especially on like a crazy quilt or something. But also, here's a doily. A doily you know, if you have maybe your grandmother's doily or your aunt or something like that, wouldn't that be a pretty embellishment? Maybe you're making a special memory quilt for somebody. So maybe you stitch a doily on. And then, of course, there's like ribbon, like beads, like everything else. You hit the craft store, there's a million different types of lace. This is a bigger one. One of the things I mentioned earlier was creative stitching on those crazy quilts, and the sky is the limit. And if you're a really great hand stitcher, there's some beautiful stitches. And I shouldn't say just hand stitching, I should have been that. There's some gorgeous machine stitches. I've started adding some more. I used to not do that at all. I used to really enjoy hand stitching. But there's some beautiful machine stitching now to make your crazy quilts or any kind of embellishing your quilt. So creative stitching, this is an example. Here's that kitchen quilt again. And you can see here I even added some lace on this one, but I used blanket stitch, a tiny blanket stitch all around the edges of my apron shapes. Next up are fabric embellishments. I mean, what better way to embellish a quilt than with fabric? I mean, we all have it. Here's some fun yo-yos. I think yo-yos are great on quilts. They look really cute. Here's some, these are all purple ones I made for a project. We'll see what they end up in, but yo-yos are a great idea. So fabric embellishments, let me just show you this one other one. This was this is that Christmas quilt again. I made these sort of dimensional holly leaves, and I put 3 in each corner, and that makes a great embellishment. Another good example would be yarn. I don't have any yarn. I've never used yarn in my sort of as an embellishment, but I think it would be really cute. I've seen some pictures online of some really pretty like ribbons or little sort of woven in type things. Yarn is a good one, and again, it comes in every single color imaginable, and even some, you know, the ones that have changed colors, that kind of thing. So yarn is an idea for embellishing a quilt. Another idea for embellishment is silk flowers. Why not try sewing down some silk flowers? This one fell out of my hand. Let's see, here we go. These are just 2 little ones. You could even just cut off the leaves. These are just teeny tiny flowers. Wouldn't that be pretty, especially on like a sentimental quilt? Maybe a bouquet of flowers or something like that. So silk flowers is an idea. And last but not least, why not try some bells? Here, I'm going to give you a little bit of noise there. I'll be quiet. This one's a real small one. You can't hear it very well. But bells are fun, especially maybe on a Christmas quilt or a holiday quilt. How much fun are bells? I mean, and again, that adds, so not only does that add texture, that adds sound as well. So bells. So there you have it. There are my 13 things to embellish a quilt with. I hope you had fun listening to the list. I am sure there are many more that I haven't thought of. So if you've done anything, I'd love to hear about it. Drop it in my comments and let me know what you embellish your quilts with. It really is a fun thing. And if you've never tried it, I urge you to give it a try. Maybe a small little piece to start or something like that. Great sentimental, great bling, great whimsy. It's, you know, the sky's the limit. If you like quilting tips, quilt patterns, freebie patterns, tutorials, that kind of thing, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I love new subscribers, and I'd really appreciate it if you do that. Thank you so much. I am on social media, so check me out at Create with Claudia. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.